delighted to welcome my next guest, Brendan O'Neill, Chief Political Writer at Spiked Online, to the show. A very good morning to you.
Hi, Julia. How you doing?
Very well indeed. Thank you so much for joining us. Lots to talk about. Let's start with where we are in terms of Ukraine, because the UK and France have signed a treaty, basically a document, promising they would commit to deploying peacekeeping troops on the ground, boots on the ground in Ukraine, in the event, and it's a big if really, if there is actually a ceasefire in Ukraine. What do you make of that promise?
I'm not sure about this. I mean, firstly, I'm not sure that it's actually going to happen, because Britain and France and Europe have not really stepped up to the mark when it comes to supporting Ukraine with what it needs. And it has needed a lot over the past 3 years, because it was criminally invaded by the imperial aggressor of Russia. And Europe too often let Ukraine down. And Zelensky and others have made that point. There's also the question of whether British and French troops want to be drawn into another war zone. You know, do we really want to be keeping the peace on that crucial border between Russia and Europe? I am fully supportive of Ukrainian self-determination. I want Russia the hell out of that country, but I'm really not sure about European troops putting their boot on the ground. I think that could potentially up the ante even more.
Well, there's no doubt at all. Putin has made it very clear, under no circumstances will he accept any NATO troops to the ground. The question is what he would be able to do about it if, and that's the big hope from this meeting in Paris, with a lot of sort of bromancy handshakes and hugs with Zelensky, but having Witkoff there and having Jared Kushner there as well, the two people who are probably closest to the president when it comes to international affairs, his sort of negotiators in the Middle East and over Ukraine, they seem to be moving some way towards the possibility of America giving some sort of backstop supporting. So it's all very well, Putin can talk the talk, but Putin ain't going to be attacking French and British troops if he knows that America is going to launch airstrikes if he does. I mean, Putin ain't going to take on the might of the Americans.
Well, that's the thing. You know, if we get some form of American backstop, then it might be more reasonable for European troops to assist in what happens post-war. But that shows that Europe is still, for all its anti-American posturing that it sometimes engages in, Europe is still very reliant on America, which is what makes all the other stuff going on right now, Venezuela, Greenland, and all the rest of it. That's what makes that really worrying, because there is a huge gap opening up between America and Europe. And I think European leaders are on a hiding to nothing if they don't realise how serious it is if they lose the support of America.
Yeah, and indeed, and that's been the big worry about Trump pulling out of NATO and all the talk about upping the amount of money and the percentage of their GDP that European countries are spending on their NATO defence commitments. You know, it's all very well, but it ain't coming very quickly. I mean, Germany's the only country that's actually upping it properly, but they're coming from a very low base over the last post-war years. Let's talk about Venezuela, because it has been, I mean, quite bizarre to watch what's happening since Saturday. The handing in of the Free Palestine flags and the Free Maduro flags being handed out to the usual suspects. The amount of people on the left, the Jeremy Corbyns, the others, who are cheering on the likes of Maduro. Isn't socialism wonderful? Isn't it fantastic? And then when it all went, let's face it, technical term, tits up there, and people are starving in the streets, having to eat their own pets, haven't got running water or electricity, and 8 million plus people leave the country just to survive. They started going a bit quiet, but now they're all big fans of Maduro.
You know, I have enjoyed watching them all kind of hand in their kafirs and take their Venezuela flags, you know, just switching from one cause to the next. You know, the poor people of Gaza are now not going to have support at all. I bet you they won't even talk about Gaza for the foreseeable future. They will no doubt come back to it because they have that unhinged hatred of Israel. But for the time being, they've just moved on. You know, it really demonstrates that so much of what passes for left-wing politics now is really just anti-Westernism. They just hate the West. They will take the side of whatever group of people they think is the most anti-West. And that might be Hamas one week, and it might be Maduro and his socialist goons the next week. That's really their driving force. Which element is most anti-West and therefore will throw our lot behind them? You know what's so striking to me is that not only are the people of Venezuela cheering, lots of people in Venezuela are cheering the ousting of Maduro, but we also right now have one of the bravest uprisings that we've seen in a long time in Iran, where young men and women are fighting for their freedom against the Islamic theocracy that rules over them, and the left is saying nothing about them. They're all for liberation, so-called, in Maduro's regime, but not in places like Iran, because their judgment is always which side hates the West, we'll join it.
It is extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, that's the thing. When you look at what Maduro has been doing. And I've talked about this actually with a fantastic guest we had on the show on Monday, who's a Venezuelan exile living in America and is an economist, about, you know, how little in the media in the West there has been actually about, not just before, but even since, why Maduro is such an awful, horrific creature. And by the way, the woman, the vice president who's taken over, and Maduro's wife, by the way, worse, you know, not even just as bad, worse than him. He's just a bit of a fool, frankly. But I mean, we're talking about, you know, the torturing, the imprisonment, the executions, extrajudicial executions of opposition people and journalists. You know, they're all up in arms about, you know, Khashoggi. But not that bothered when it happens in Venezuela. But the drug running, the working with the likes of Iran, Russia, China, to basically, you know, provide, you know, money launder, gate arms for Hezbollah to launch terror attacks. I mean, you know, this is I think it's what Donald Trump would call a bad hombre. I think is what he would call him. But it is extraordinary in terms of the West's reaction, and particularly our Prime Minister Keir Starmer's reaction. Did you have a scintilla of sympathy for him, having to basically walk the walk of Mr. Human Rights, Mr. International Law obsessed, man of virtue on the left, having to basically not criticise Donald Trump too much?
I had a tiny bit of sympathy for him, I have to say, because he is in a real bind, because he loves to ponce around the world as the boss man of human rights, you know, the white savior of all these kind of oppressed people. That's the image he's had of himself for a long time. Uphold international law, that very stiff kind of, you know, weird approach to the global affairs that people like him have. And now he can't say that. He can't say that because he's got to keep sweet with Trump and the White House, which I think we do have to keep with them, by the way. So he's in a tricky situation. But you know what's really getting on my wick is all these people in Britain and Europe, all these leftists and liberals who are suddenly overnight interested in the issue of sovereignty. They're all talking about Venezuelan sovereignty and Trump's criminal violation of it. These are the same people who tried to stop Brexit. These are the same people who love the European Union, which is designed to undermine European sovereignty. These are the same people who love the ECHR, which waters down our borders and overrules our politicians. These are the same people who turn a blind eye to the erosion of Britain's borders and the crossing of the channel of hundreds of young men every day. They don't give a damn about sovereignty. So I think that hypocrisy that we're seeing is really coming to the fore.
And so unusual from the left, so unusual. In terms of Greenland, where are you on Greenland? Because again, we had strong statements from the Coalition of the Willing meeting in Paris yesterday, although I'm not quite sure we care what Spain thinks of anything. I mean, you and whose army? But you can say that about Britain as well. They're saying, you know, the future of Greenland should be up to the people of Greenland. Well, by all accounts, most of the people of Greenland are rather unhappy about being a colony of Denmark. We're talking about 56,000 people. Only about half of those are actually Greenland natives. You know, Donald Trump is in official White House statements, not just his off-the-cuff remarks on aeroplanes to journalists, is still talking about, you know, taking Greenland, whether by military means or otherwise. Realistically, if Donald Trump does decide to do this, or whether he decides to, you know, just pay $10 million to each Greenlander and say, you know, here's the payment, do you want to accept the payment and vote to, you know, to let us be in control? But if whatever he does decide to do, there isn't anything that the European leaders can actually do, is there?
Nothing at all. Absolutely nothing. It's really going to highlight their impotence on the global stage. You know, Europe is a knackered old power. Europe used to rule the world, and it doesn't anymore. Things have changed enormously. There's now America coming back to the fore. There's China, there's India, Russia. You know, Europe is really on the back foot on so many of these issues. You know, my view, the democratically elected Prime Minister of Greenland has said he doesn't want the country to be annexed by Trump. For me, that's it. That's discussion over, because I believe in democracy and I believe in sovereignty. Having said that, loads of Greenlandic people do not want to be associated with Denmark anymore. I think they would be better off having a close relationship with America. So if Trump, instead of the bluster, what I think Trump should do is try to convince the Greenlandic government to have a referendum, convince the people that they'd be better off closer to the United States, which I think they would be, and do it in that democratic way. And that would really shove it to Europe, because then they wouldn't have anything to moan about.
Yeah, also, it's extraordinary they're sitting on all these rare earth minerals and are not exploiting them, and frankly, all being rich. I think it's madness, isn't it? Now, listen, we've spoken to you many times about the issue of Israel and anti-Semitism, both at home and abroad, and you're the author of the brilliant book, After the Pogrom, 7th of October, Israel and the Crisis of Civilizations. I do want to get your thoughts also on this extraordinary the ongoing row about the decision by the West Midlands Police in Birmingham to basically ban Israeli football fans from that Maccabi Tel Aviv Aston Villa match in early November. We've seen the West Midlands Police Chief, Craig Guilford, is now get called from the leader of the Tories, Remy Badenoch, that he has to be sacked because he and basically his henchmen, they basically lied and lied again about the reasons for banning basically Israeli Jews from Birmingham, and they basically kowtowed to Islamist fundamentalist threats from local self-appointed community leaders in Birmingham and extremist imams, basically saying we don't want Jews in our city. What do you make of this story?
I think this is one of the worst police scandals in decades. Yep. It really is very serious indeed. And I would say it's a police racism scandal, actually, because if they had behaved like this in relation to any other minority in this country, the left would be up in arms, the anti-war movement the anti-racism movement would be on the streets. We know why they're not, because the minority in question is Jews and they don't care about Jews. But what West Midlands Police did is extraordinary. They were given information that local Islamist mobs were intending to arm themselves in order to attack these Jews from Israel. They suppressed that information and instead they banned the Jews. Yep. So they got information that Jews might be attacked, and their solution to that was to ban Jews. And they capitulated entirely to the Islamist mob. They did its bidding. They made Villa Park a Jew-free zone, which is what those armed anti-Semites were effectively demanding. Yep. They did the bidding of a racist mob of Jew haters. You can't get more serious than that. And then they suppressed information. They lied about it. They covered it up. They put certain things into the public realm and hid other things. You know, not only is the police chief's position untenable, the ideology of multiculturalism is now untenable, because this is the sectarianism that it gives rise to. Exactly. And I think everyone can now see what a poisonous ideology this is.
Absolutely. Chief political writer at Spiked Online, Brendan O'Neill, always good to hear from you. Thank you so much. Quick response to that particular story from Claire Pearsall, who's still with me in the studio.
Yeah, I mean, the police story is just beggars belief, really, doesn't it? That these people are allowed to hold those positions, to keep going and ignore the Jewish community. Yeah. I mean, what more do these people have to do? Many more times do they have to say they feel unsafe?
I just simply don't understand. Well, how is this guy still in a job? No. How is he still in a... He's obviously got something on someone, because he's still in a job today, honestly. Anyway,